They say some deaths are silent. Mine happened at 2:17 p.m. on a Thursday. No warning, no heads up. Just a calendar invite titled Quick Sync and a room that smelled like Betrayal wearing cologne. He walked in like he owned the oxygen, because technically now he did. Colin Whitmore, freshly minted MBA, legacy bloodline, jawline you could hang a towel on, and a chip on his shoulder big enough to qualify as carry-on luggage. He sat at the head of the table like it had been waiting for him his whole life. Leaned back in his navy blazer. No tie, no notes. Just arrogance served cold. "Let's not waste time," he said, sipping some neon green energy drink like it was a birthright. "I've reviewed the org chart. There's a lot of legacy fat here, redundancy, people who've been here too long doing too little." Then he turned to me. "I'm sorry, Rachel, but strategic vendor relations is a function we'll be sunsetting." Sunsetting. Like I was a beach photo on Instagram. I didn't speak, didn't flinch, just stared at the dot on his expensive Italian loafers, wondering how many people he'd step on before breakfast. He didn't know, or care, that I'd been with the company for 14 years, that I built our vendor network from napkins and red-eye flights, that I'd negotiated our freight contracts during a pandemic while my mother was dying in ICU. He wasn't there for the floods, the shortages, the fire in Sector B that almost wiped our West Coast fulfillment. But I was. I was the one who rerouted everything in under 48 hours. The one who stayed on the phone until my voice gave out. The one who turned a third-tier shipping firm into our lifeline. Colin didn't know any of that. All he knew was that his dad had stepped down for a sabbatical in Switzerland, and now he was streamlining operations. Translation: cutting out the people who made him uncomfortable because they remembered when he still had braces and called Excel confusing. I nodded. That was it. Didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't beg. He slid the folder across the table with a smile that said he thought this was a mercy kill. 6 months severance, he said. Generous, I think. You've been solid. Not great, not essential, just solid. Like a forgotten support beam in a building no one questions until the ceiling caves in. I signed the paper with the same hand that once closed a $4.2 million vendor contract without legal review. That pen felt heavier than anything I'd lifted in years. I left the room with a smile painted over fire. Didn't look back. Walked past every desk and every intern who owed their training to my slides. Past the receptionist I'd bought lunch for last week when her card declined. Past the mural I commissioned from a local artist for our 5-year anniversary, now covered by a vision statement poster. I went home, poured wine, the good kind, the one I was saving for something big. Well, this was it. And then I opened the other folder, the one in my home safe, the one labeled break in case of ego-driven nepotism. Inside, a contact, a name, a company, Viridian Freight Logistics, our biggest supplier. 71% of all outbound fulfillment ran through them. Quiet, small scale, family owned. They never made the press. But they always made the deadline. What Colin didn't know, because he'd never cared to ask, was that last year, their founder, Walter, told me he was looking to retire. No heirs, no board, just him and a spreadsheet full of invoices. He said if I ever wanted to talk, he'd listen. So I called. He picked up on the second ring. Rachel? Walter, you still thinking of stepping down? There was a pause, a smile in his voice. You still thinking of stepping up? I checked my bank account, did some math. Severance, personal savings. The crypto wallet I'd forgotten about until 2 months ago. I'm not just stepping up, I said. I'm buying in. Silence. Then, come by Monday morning. We'll talk numbers. You'll like the view. I hung up and felt it in my spine. The shift. I hadn't just lost a job. I'd been handed an opportunity in disguise. A quiet weapon. A chance to own what he never understood. And come Monday? Colin was going to learn that some legacy staff don't go quietly. Sometimes they walk out the front door and come back through the freight entrance. I didn't sleep that weekend, not because I was scared, because I wasn't. I was restless, like I could feel something massive shifting beneath my feet. A tectonic plate of every gritted teeth meeting, every late-night negotiation, every ignored email where I warned exactly what would happen if they let idiots near the supply chain. Colin thought he'd erased me with a signature, but all he did was free my hands. By Sunday morning, I'd run the numbers 10 different ways. If I liquidated my dormant investment account, combined my severance, and cashed out a small inheritance I'd been sitting on, just enough to feel guilty about, but never enough to make real moves, I could cover the offer Walter had hinted at last year. 51%. Not a majority share in some tech startup or media agency. Majority ownership in Viridian Freight Logistics, the literal backbone of Colin's inherited empire. I drove 2 hours out to Walter's office Monday morning. No logos, no glass walls, no tech bros in Allbirds pacing with oat milk lattes. Just a squat building with rusted signage and a vending machine that hadn't worked since 2018. Walter met me in the parking lot. He was wearing a faded polo and khakis that had survived at least 2 decades of warehouse life. He looked exactly the same as he did the last time I saw him. Like a man who hated small talk and trusted paper more than people. "Still drink black coffee with 1 sugar?" he asked. "Only when I want to impress someone." He barked a laugh. "Then you're in luck. The Keurig died last month." We went inside. His office hadn't changed. File cabinets, shipping manifests, a dusty globe on the corner desk. He slid a folder toward me. "Here's the offer. Includes our asset list, debt, real estate holdings, client spread, all of it. You'll take over operations, but I'll stay on for 6 months to transition." I scanned the first few pages. My heart picked up. The numbers weren't just manageable. They were smart. Clean margins, predictable growth, a few aging trucks I could replace within a year. "Why me?" I asked, finally. He leaned back. "Because you're the only one who treated us like people, not leverage." That hit harder than I expected. He added, "Colin's people don't even know who we are. They think freight moves itself. You? You knew which driver had a kid in the NICU and which route was closed for bridge repairs without ever asking." I signed the papers that afternoon, transferred the funds by wire before I even left the building. By 3:41 p.m., I owned 51% of Viridian Freight. I didn't gloat. I didn't call anyone. I didn't update LinkedIn with a smug new title. I just drove home, made dinner like any other Monday, and stared at the quiet realization that my future no longer belonged to someone else's quarterly budget. Colin had no idea. That's what made it so satisfying. He still thought I was jobless, probably picturing me crying in a bathrobe, binge-watching reality shows while my severance slowly disappeared. He hadn't even bothered to disable my email until Friday. Classic amateur move. The real win wasn't just ownership, it was positioning. Whitmore Corp., his newly streamlined empire, depended on Viridian for 71% of its outbound volume. That's everything from pharmaceuticals to home appliances. They'd built entire quarterly forecasts assuming we'd continue our long-term contract unchanged. Now I controlled the bottleneck, but I didn't plan to use it. Not yet. Because revenge without precision is just noise. Instead, I reviewed the vendor contracts one by one. I met with the dispatch team, the route managers, the warehouse foremen who'd been working here since I was in high school. I asked real questions, listened, learned. My plan wasn't just to get even. It was to build something smarter, tighter, more resilient. Colin was playing a zero-sum game. I was building the board. But then, on Friday, something strange happened. My phone rang. Block number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Same number. And finally, a text. Urgent. From the board. You need to call us back. My stomach dropped, because no one said from the board unless something was about to go nuclear. I called back. The voice that answered was Margaret Lynn, a senior board member at Whitmore Corporation. I'd only spoken to her once, years ago, during a contract renegotiation. "Rachel," she said, "we need to speak, in person, immediately." I kept my voice even. "Everything all right?" There was a pause. "You've caused a bit of a stir." I played dumb. "I've been enjoying some time off." Another pause. Then carefully, "Did you purchase a controlling interest in Viridian Freight?" Silence. I looked out the window. The trucks were still moving. Nothing had changed. Except everything. "I did," I said. There was shuffling in the background, raised voices. Then I heard it. Faint but unmistakable. "You fired our owner?" Then the line cut. The silence after the call was louder than any boardroom shouting match I'd ever heard. I stared at my phone for a long time, listening to the hum of the warehouse below my office, the low rumble of forklifts, the echo of voices, the quiet rhythm of things that still worked because I did. "You fired our owner?" The words played again in my mind like a movie trailer for something explosive. And this time, I didn't flinch, because I knew what came next. Power doesn't vanish. It scrambles. It clutches. It spins. It sends emails labeled urgent and meetings that weren't on the calendar. And just before noon, it came for me. A black SUV pulled up outside Viridian. 3 men in suits stepped out. One I recognized. Gregson, Whitmore Corp's head of procurement. The other 2 wore those government-adjacent expressions you only see in people who know how fast things can fall apart. They didn't come through the front door. They walked around back, past the loading docks, past the vending machines, right into the operations wing, bold, fast, nervous. Someone knocked on my office door before I saw them. My logistics coordinator, Paula, whispered, "You've got visitors." I stood. I didn't fix my hair. I didn't straighten my jacket. I walked down the hallway like it was just another day. "Rachel," Gregson said the moment he saw me, voice already tight. "We weren't expecting this." "Ownership?" I said. I wasn't either, but sometimes opportunity looks like an insult. He tried to smile. Failed. "The board didn't know. Colin didn't know. That much is obvious," I said. "But the paperwork is signed. It's done." One of the suits cleared his throat. "We need to understand your intentions. You now control the logistics network for the majority of Whitmore's national distribution. That makes you a significant variable." I held his gaze. "I'm not a variable. I'm a constant. You just didn't see me before." Gregson stepped in, trying to find stable ground. "Are you planning to disrupt existing service levels?" I shrugged. "Are you planning to insult me again and expect nothing changes?" He didn't respond. "Look," I added, "I'm not trying to sabotage anything. If you maintain your end of the contract, we'll do the same. Viridian will operate professionally, transparently, and on schedule." "But?" he asked, because there always is one. I didn't smile. "But there will be no shortcuts, no cost-cutting behind my back, no pivoting to cheaper vendors without notice while I carry the burden of your volume. I'm not your supplier now. I'm your partner, and you'll treat me like one." He looked at me like I'd changed languages, because in his world, partnerships were reserved for people with stock options and golf memberships, not for the woman who used to send emails marked high importance and get ignored. "Understood," he said finally. The suits nodded. One scribbled something in a leather notebook. They left without shaking my hand. I sat at my desk and let the silence settle again. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered this time. "Rachel." It was Margaret Lynn again. No preamble. "I assume you've been briefed," I said. "You've turned the company upside down." "No," I replied. "Colin did that. I just flipped it right side up." She exhaled, slow. "He's not handling it well." I'm not shocked. There was a long pause. Then she asked, "Would you be willing to meet?" Privately, off the record. My stomach tightened. Why? Because some of us on the board remember how this place actually ran before the sons of CEOs started calling shots. And because, quite frankly, we're scared of what happens if Colin keeps pretending he understands freight. I didn't answer right away. Tomorrow, 8:30, Hotel Sheridan, Conference Room B. Bring documentation, bring facts. I hung up and leaned back. And just like that, the game changed again. Because I wasn't just the woman they fired. I was now the person they needed. But I knew better than to celebrate. People don't like their power questioned, especially when it comes from someone they dismissed. That night, Colin broke his silence. He posted a company-wide memo, the kind wrapped in corporate perfume and disguised as transparency. We value all our partners and remain committed to the strategic vision of Whitmore Corp's next chapter. Any recent organizational changes are in alignment with long-term goals. No mention of me. No mention of the ownership change. Just fear, thinly veiled as vision. He didn't see me as a threat yet. He still thought this was a bad dream. Something he could spin into a hiccup at next quarter's town hall. But it wasn't. Because I had the numbers. I had the contracts. And now, I had the board's attention. Come morning, I'd walk into that conference room not as an employee, not as a vendor, but as the storm they never saw coming. The Hotel Sheridan was beige in the way expensive places always are. Quiet, neutral, and designed to make power feel comfortable. I arrived at 8:22 a.m., exactly 8 minutes early. I wasn't interested in showing up like I was nervous, but I wanted to walk in composed, unrushed, like someone who wasn't here for permission, just clarity. Conference Room B was tucked at the end of a marble hallway lined with art you couldn't name, but knew cost more than your car. The door was open. Inside sat Margaret Lynn. She wore a navy pantsuit and glasses with thin silver frames. Her expression was unreadable, but she didn't look surprised to see me. She gestured to the seat across from her. "Coffee?" she asked. "No thanks," I said. "Let's get to it." She nodded. "Good, because this isn't just a check-in. It's a temperature read." I opened the folder I'd brought with me. 3 neatly stacked pages, nothing more. But every line carried weight. Viridian Freight, I began, currently services 71.3% of Whitmore Corp's domestic outbound volume. Contracts are valid through Q4 of next year, with escalation clauses that I now control. She didn't blink. We're aware. I've inherited a profitable, scalable operation. Our lead time is better than anyone in your rotation. And until last week, Whitmore's procurement team had no issues with our service. And yet, she said, here we are. I nodded. Because Colin didn't just remove me. He destabilized your distribution chain and created a liability none of you planned for. I wasn't dead weight. I was the balance point. She leaned back, thoughtful. So what do you want, Rachel? That question. The one everyone asks when a woman takes power unexpectedly. Like it couldn't just be competence. There had to be an agenda. I exhaled slowly. I want Whitmore to honor its existing terms. No interference. No sudden reassessments. I won't tolerate pressure or delay tactics. She nodded slowly, then added, And Colin? I met her eyes. He's your problem, not mine. A pause, the kind that hums with implications. He's already talking to legal, she said, claiming conflict of interest, speculating sabotage. That's not surprising, I said. But there's no case. Everything I've done is documented and legal. His mistake was thinking I was disposable. Mine would be assuming he'll take this lying down. She gave a dry smile. He won't. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. She folded her hands. If he tries to terminate the Viridian contract early, we'll lose 6 months of supply coverage. Procurement has no alternate solution. No infrastructure. You know that. That's not my concern, I replied. But I won't allow him to bully his way through this. I'm not an employee anymore. I'm a stakeholder. She looked at me for a long time. Then, finally, she reached into her bag and slid a white envelope across the table. I frowned. What's this? Internal audit request. The board's quietly launching a review of all vendor relationships initiated by Colin in the past 12 months. I opened the envelope. There it was. 4 pages, stamped and initialed. The same kind of document that could end a career before HR ever got involved. You're going after him? I asked. She shrugged. We're protecting the company. If that means he goes down with it, so be it. I studied her for a moment. Margaret had always seemed like a background presence, but now I saw it clearly. She wasn't passive. She was surgical. Why tell me this? I asked. Because you're in this story whether you like it or not. You can help control the fallout, or become a casualty of it. I didn't answer. Not immediately. Because I knew the risk. Colin wouldn't go quietly. He had the name, the access, the paranoia. And people like that? They'd rather burn the ship than admit they were never steering. By noon, word had spread. My phone buzzed with messages. Former coworkers, vendors, even 2 junior analysts who used to shadow me asking if the rumors were true. But the one that mattered came at 12:47 p.m. from Colin Whitmore. Subject: cease and desist. Notice I opened it. Effective immediately, you are to halt all communication with current Whitmore Corp employees regarding internal operations, supplier arrangements, or matters related to proprietary information. It was laughable, and also calculated. He wanted me scared, cornered, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I replied with a single sentence. You should probably speak to your board before you dig this hole any deeper. And then I forwarded Margaret a copy. Later that evening, I got another email. Not from Colin, from legal. Subject: Whitmore Corp. v. Rachel Liu. Preliminary review. No body text, just the title. South. This was how he wanted to play it. Fine. He'd fired me thinking I was powerless. Now he was trying to sue the woman who controlled his supply chain. But there was one thing he didn't know. I had the receipts, and tomorrow I'd bring them. By sunrise, I was at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I couldn't taste and 3 open laptops in front of me. The cease and desist was a warning shot. The lawsuit? That was war. Colin didn't want to win. He wanted to stall, tie me up in court, freeze Viridian's contract pipeline, scare other partners into backing off. If he couldn't stop me through control, he'd try fear. And I knew how that game was played, because I'd seen fear before. In vendors who were late on payments, in warehouse managers right before budget cuts, in employees being escorted out with boxes and questions no one would answer. But I wasn't afraid now. I was furious, so I got to work. By noon, I had compiled over 30 documents, time-stamped emails, screenshots, vendor logs, meeting notes from the last 18 months, every single one showing that Viridian had operated fully above board, and that I, even as an employee, had made no moves toward ownership until after termination. The best part? The paper trail showed Colin had been reviewing vendor costs for months, and that he'd tried to initiate a transition away from Viridian without board approval, even while claiming publicly that contracts were stable. That wasn't just incompetence. That was liability. At 3:15 p.m., I walked into my attorney's office. Eliza Hart. Sharp, calm, and dangerous in heels. She'd handled 2 whistleblower cases and a high-profile breach of contract suit against a Fortune 100 company. All wins. She scanned the lawsuit, then the documents I handed her, one eyebrow slightly raised. He really tried it, huh? He thinks he's untouchable, I said. She smirked. Good. Arrogance makes my job easier. We spent 3 hours drafting a response, a mix of legal defense and quiet aggression. But the real weapon? A countersuit, defamation, malicious interference, contract disruption. And because he initiated legal proceedings first, I was now fully justified in submitting evidence that otherwise would have stayed buried. This won't just block him, Eliza said. It'll expose him. I nodded. Good. The board had tried to protect him quietly. Let him fumble his way out with a severance and a soft press release. But now? Now he'd gone public. That night I received a calendar invite. Subject: emergency session, Whitmore Board of Directors. Time: tomorrow, 9 a.m. Location: Whitmore Tower, executive level. They didn't even bother to blind copy the invite list. 21 names, including Colin, and me. I slept 4 hours, woke up twice. The second time, I found myself staring at the ceiling, thinking of every moment I'd been dismissed, minimized, talked over, talked down to. And now they wanted me in the tower. Not through the back door, not in the freight wing, at the table. I arrived at 8:55 a.m. Sharp, no assistant, no fanfare. Just a black folder in hand and a purpose that felt like armor. The executive boardroom was cold, oversized, polished oak, glass walls. Colin sat 2 seats down from the head of the table, jaw tight, eyes dark. Margaret sat at the end. She didn't smile, just nodded toward the empty chair across from Colin. I sat. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the legal counsel cleared his throat. We're here to address the escalating conflict between Whitmore Corporation and Ms. Rachel Liu, particularly surrounding her recent acquisition of Viridian Freight and the resulting contractual tension. Colin jumped in. She blindsided us. She used her position to get insider knowledge and then undermined our procurement operation. I stayed silent. Let him talk. She coordinated with our supplier, after her termination, to disrupt operations. That's corporate sabotage, and we have the right to protect the company. Then Eliza spoke. Cool, calm. Actually, your son unilaterally terminated Ms. Liu without board consultation, thereby nullifying any ongoing insider status. The acquisition occurred weeks after separation, and we have records showing he had already been attempting to dissolve the Viridian contract prior to her involvement. She opened the black folder and slid copies down the table, one to every board member. Emails, memos, budget discussions, and a proposal draft dated before Rachel's departure. All signed by Colin, all without oversight. The board went quiet. One member, a man I didn't recognize, muttered, "This is bad." Colin tried to recover. Even if that's true, she's exploiting the company's dependency. It's unethical. I leaned forward for the first time. What's unethical is assuming I'd stay quiet. What's unethical is firing someone who built your supply chain from scratch and thinking that somehow ends the story. I didn't create your dependency. I protected it. You destroyed that trust. I just bought what you no longer respected. The room held its breath. Then Robert Whitmore, Colin's father, founder of the company, spoke for the first time. He'd joined by video call. His face appeared on the wall monitor, older than I remembered, but sharp. "Colin," he said, "you told me this was under control." Colin froze. "It's not," Robert said, "and it hasn't been for a while." Then he turned to the camera. "Rachel," he said, voice slow but firm. "What would it take for this to end without further damage?" I could have asked for anything in that moment, but I already knew the answer. There was a long silence after Robert Whitmore asked me what it would take to end this. I looked around the boardroom, the same room I used to walk past with my badge clipped to my belt and a vendor file under my arm. I used to wonder what decisions were made in there, what it would feel like to sit at that table. Now I knew. It didn't feel like power. It felt like damage control. I placed both hands on the polished oak and said clearly, "I don't want a payout. I don't want silence money. And I don't want Colin in my inbox ever again." Murmurs across the table. "I want a public, notarized statement from Whitmore Corp acknowledging the change in ownership at Viridian Freight, affirming our partnership and confirming that no legal action will be pursued against me or Viridian moving forward." Robert nodded once. And, and, I continued, I want Colin's resignation. Effective immediately. No vague titles, no consultant roles. I want his access revoked and his name removed from any strategic procurement decisions. Colin sat up, red-faced. You're joking. No, I said calmly. You gambled with other people's jobs. You fired me without cause, and now you're being held accountable. It's called a consequence. This is a hostage demand, he shouted. It's called accountability, Margaret said from the head of the table. Her voice, low but steel-edged, cut through his panic. The room grew quiet. Then Robert, still on video, exhaled and said, Colin, step outside. I'm not. Now. Colin stood, visibly shaking, and walked out the door without another word. When it clicked shut behind him, Robert looked directly at the camera. The board will take your request under advisement. You'll have an answer within 24 hours. I stood. You have 12. And I left. I didn't say goodbye. That night, I didn't open wine. I didn't turn on music. I didn't even speak to anyone. I just sat on my balcony, the city lights humming beneath me, and thought about everything that had led to that moment. 14 years, late flights, missed birthdays, vendor calls in hospital parking lots. Not a title, not a promotion, not a word of recognition. But in the end, I didn't need them to name me. I named myself. The next morning, 9:43 a.m., I received a certified email. Subject: Whitmore Board Resolution. I opened it. Effective immediately, Colin Whitmore has stepped down from his role at Whitmore Corp. The board formally recognizes Rachel Liu as the majority owner of Viridian Freight and reaffirms the company's ongoing partnership. All legal proceedings initiated by former management have been withdrawn. There was no apology. Just facts. That was enough. By noon, it was in the press. Whitmore shakeup, CEO's son ousted after vendor power shift. Former executive turned owner reclaims her seat. I didn't give a statement. I didn't need to. The numbers spoke for me. Within 2 weeks, Viridian secured 3 new contracts, partners that had been watching the storm, waiting to see if I'd survive it. The moment I did, they picked up the phone. 2 of my former colleagues reached out and asked if we were hiring. One of them had been in the room when Colin fired me. I said yes, not out of pettiness, but because some people deserve a second chance. Others don't. 3 weeks later, I walked past Whitmore Tower. It looked the same. Glass, steel, ambition in concrete form. But something had changed. Not the building. Me. I didn't stop. I didn't look up. I just kept walking. That night, I pulled an old note out of my desk drawer. Something I'd written years ago in a moment of burnout, right before an all-hands call no one would remember. It said, "Someday I'll leave, and they won't notice until they have to pay for it." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I threw it away. Because they had noticed, and they had paid for it. But that wasn't the story anymore. This is, sometimes you give a company everything, and they still choose someone who's louder, younger, or better connected. They call it strategy. But it's not. It's blindness. And sometimes the person they underestimated becomes the person they depend on. Not out of revenge, out of necessity. And if you're lucky, or just prepared, you don't burn the bridge. You buy the river underneath it. My name is Samantha. I'm 39 years old, and I spent the last 8 years at Eastbridge Tech building something I was proud of. Loyalty, performance, leadership. Check, check, and check. Every quarter, I beat my KPIs. Every crisis, I volunteered to lead the recovery. I even trained half the managers they have now. But on a rainy Thursday afternoon, all of that became irrelevant in 5 words. Congratulations to my niece, Lisa. I blinked, not sure I heard right. The conference room erupted in polite claps, but my ears were ringing. Lisa smiled like she'd just discovered gravity. She stood up, flashing a too bright grin, and waved modestly as if she hadn't just skipped over an entire career ladder in 4 months. Lisa will be our new director of strategic operations, my boss, Alan, said. She brings fresh perspective and energy, and I'm confident she'll help us grow. Fresh perspective. That's what they always say when they promote someone young, green, and deeply connected to someone in power. Lisa was Alan's sister's daughter. Everyone knew. No one talked about it. I sat frozen, still holding the presentation clicker from the quarterly review I had just delivered. The one where I'd outlined a strategy that saved the company $1.2 million in supply costs. The same review that Alan had praised, right before handing my job to his niece. Alan smiled at me. Samantha, can you help Lisa transition into the role? You've been instrumental in getting our operations to where they are. Instrumental, like a wrench or a cog. Something useful. Replaceable. I nodded slowly, forced a smile. Of course. Happy to help. But inside, something broke. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. 8 years ago, I'd started here after a painful divorce. My ex-husband had taken half our assets and all of my confidence. I had to rebuild from the ground up. Eastbridge was supposed to be that ground. I worked overtime, stayed late, gave up vacations. I brought my daughter to the office on weekends when I couldn't find childcare. I was the dependable one. The fixer, the one who made things work when others panicked. When COVID hit, I was the one who designed the remote logistics protocol that kept our entire supply chain afloat. No bonuses that year, but Alan gave me a thank you card. It was handwritten. Said I was management material. Funny how management material just meant someone you could lean on without promoting. Lisa had joined the company 4 months ago, straight out of grad school. She was bright, no doubt. But she'd never led a team, negotiated a vendor contract, or handled a 2 a.m. crisis when a shipment got delayed in customs. I watched her thank the team, say how humbled and honored she was. She even said she hoped to learn from everyone. As if she wasn't just handed the position I'd worked nearly a decade for. After the meeting, I went back to my desk, closed the door, and sat down in silence. The office around me buzzed as usual. Phones ringing, emails pinging, but I couldn't hear it. I stared at my laptop, blinking back the heat in my eyes. Then I opened a blank document and began typing. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't emotional. It was a letter. Short, direct, professional. Subject, resignation notice. Effective in 2 weeks, I outlined my reasons, thanked the company for the experience, and offered to help with the transition. I added one final sentence at the end, one that made me smile for real this time. Good luck to Lisa. I printed it, folded it, and slipped it into an envelope. It took me 30 minutes to pack my desk. I left most things, binders, notebooks, internal guides I'd created. I wasn't taking anything except my dignity. As I walked toward Alan's office, the letter in my hand, I could already feel the air shifting around me. He was standing, talking to someone in the hallway. I waited. When he noticed me, he smiled like nothing had happened. Samantha, great work on the review today. I handed him the envelope. What's this? He asked. My 2 weeks. He laughed, assuming I was joking. Then he opened it. His expression changed. You can't do this, he said, voice tightening. We need you right now. You have Lisa now, I replied, calm as ice. I'm sure she'll figure it out. That's when he raised his voice. Samantha, don't be rash. This isn't professional. You're reacting emotionally. Think about your daughter. Think about your career. I met his eyes. I am thinking about both. And then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. But I knew, even before I reached my car, that this was just the beginning. The Monday after I submitted my resignation, I arrived at the office at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes earlier than usual. Not because I had something to prove, but because I wanted my last 2 weeks to be clean, controlled, and on my terms. Lisa was already at her new desk. My old desk, if we're being honest, hovering awkwardly in front of 3 monitors and a tangled mess of documents. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Samantha, I was hoping you'd come in early," she said, clearly relieved. "I need a little help understanding the Q2 vendor reconciliation report." I nodded. "Sure, let's go over it." I pulled up the supply dashboard I had built from scratch over 5 years. It linked active orders, pricing tiers, delivery schedules, and incident reports across 12 vendors in real time. Lisa blinked at the interface like she was looking at ancient runes. How did you set this up?" she asked. "Just experience," I said gently. We spent the next hour reviewing critical accounts: Westbrook Machinery, Haldron Metal, and Copper Splice components. These 3 alone made up over 40% of our monthly revenue. Each had unique contract terms, delivery deadlines, and quirks only learned through time and crisis. I gave her a printed copy of the client protocols I had created and kept updated like a Bible. Lisa looked overwhelmed. "I didn't realize it was this intricate," she admitted. "That's what operations is," I said. "It looks like spreadsheets, but it's really relationships, timing, and knowing what can go wrong before it does." Alan walked by mid-conversation, stopped at the glass door, and tapped once before entering. "Morning, ladies," he said, too cheerfully. "How's the handover going?" Lisa gave him a small, unsure smile. "Samantha's been amazing. There's just so much, more than I expected." Alan gave me a quick glance as if trying to read my expression. "Well, you're in good hands. Samantha's been our backbone. That's why I'm glad she's staying through the transition." I didn't respond. The silence hung for a beat too long, so he shifted his tone. "I was thinking we could all meet later today to go over the upcoming Q3 rollout. Sound good?" Lisa nodded quickly. I just said, "Let me know what time." After he left, Lisa turned back to me. "He said you'd created most of these processes, but I didn't realize how dependent everything was on your work." I didn't say anything. She was right, and she was beginning to realize it. That afternoon at 3 p.m., we met in the small strategy room to discuss the Q3 rollout. The room had a whiteboard, a speakerphone, and a mild coffee stain smell that never left. Alan kicked off the meeting. "So Lisa, walk us through your proposed updates to the rollout timeline." Lisa stood, clearly nervous but trying to mask it. She began explaining that she wanted to streamline some of our vendor communications by consolidating touchpoints and automating reporting using a new SaaS platform her business school cohort had recommended. I listened. To her credit, Lisa had ideas, but none of them accounted for the real-world chaos of industrial manufacturing. Last-minute production delays, customs holdups, weather disruptions. The vendors we worked with didn't always respond well to automation or new platforms. Some still used fax machines. Alan nodded through her presentation. "Fresh thinking, that's exactly what we need." He looked at me. "Samantha, thoughts?" I kept my tone neutral. Some of the tools she's proposing could be helpful in theory, but our current vendors are extremely sensitive to change. A rollout like this would require 6 months of pilot testing and face-to-face training. Alan's expression tightened. "Resistance to innovation is exactly what keeps us stuck." I raised an eyebrow. "Is it resistance or reality?" Lisa shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Alan tapped his pen on the table and said nothing. After the meeting, I returned to my desk and found a voicemail from one of our biggest clients, Westbrook Machinery. "Samantha, it's Tom," the voice said. "Not sure who to talk to about the delayed shipment to San Antonio. We've got a crew on standby. Can you call me back?" It had begun. I forwarded the message to Lisa, copied Alan, and followed up with a short note. "This is the type of issue that requires immediate escalation to Tucson Freight. Recommend calling Dave directly. His number's in the supplier folder." An hour later, I passed Lisa's desk. She was still typing up an email. "Did you call Dave from Tucson?" I asked gently. "No, I emailed him instead. I figured I'd give him time to respond, she said. I paused. Dave's 67. He doesn't check his email after 3 p.m., and San Antonio is a rush delivery. You'll want to call him now. Lisa's face turned pale. She picked up the phone. I kept walking. That evening, I sat on my couch, glass of wine in hand, laptop open. My daughter, Olivia, peeked in from the hallway. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Just a long day. You look tired, she said. But kind of proud too? I smiled. I handed over the job they thought I couldn't walk away from, I said. And they're already realizing I wasn't just filling a chair. She walked over and sat beside me. I'm proud of you too, she said. They'll see what they lost, and you'll build something better. By Thursday morning, things had already begun to wobble. I walked into the office to find Lisa staring at the printer like it had personally insulted her. She looked up with a sheepish smile. The shipment logs won't print correctly. They're formatted weird. I took a look and instantly saw the problem. She was pulling the logs from the internal summary, not the master file. A rookie mistake. One I might have made in my first month. Not in my fourth. I fixed it, briefly explained the difference between the two files, and went to my desk. Minutes later, I received a message from Copper Splice Components, subject line, Urgent Invoice Discrepancy. They were one of our most detail-sensitive accounts. Any variation, even if it was $10 off, meant immediate flags. The email read, We were quoted a 6.7% discount on the Tucson batch order last month, but the new invoice shows full pricing. Please clarify within the next 4 hours, or we'll suspend this PO until resolved. I checked the logs. The discount had been agreed verbally and logged in a note in the CRM under my username. Lisa hadn't included it in the export file she used to issue the invoice. I sighed. This wasn't sabotage, it was inexperience. But to a client, it didn't matter. Their trust in us was built on seamless execution, not excuses. I walked over to Lisa's desk. Did you send the Copper Splice invoice? I asked. She nodded. Why? They're pausing the PO. You missed the negotiated discount. She blinked. Wait, Alan said I should go by the standard pricing sheet. And I told Copper Splice we'd adjust this one due to the freight delays last quarter. It's in the CRM notes. Lisa looked genuinely panicked. Should I call them? You have to. And apologize. And fix the invoice before 10 o'clock. She glanced at the clock. 9:17. I'll help you, I added, because I couldn't help myself. I didn't want her to fail. Not really. I just wanted someone to understand that I hadn't failed. Later that afternoon, Alan called me into his office. He looked tired, eyes sunken, shirt wrinkled. A man used to control, now juggling broken glass. I heard about Copper Splice, he said without looking at me. Lisa said you helped resolve it. I did, I replied. But it's going to keep happening. He looked up sharply. Why would you say that? Because you gave her a role she's not ready for, I said evenly. And you're asking her to lead a system she doesn't understand. Alan leaned back and exhaled. Samantha, look, I know you're frustrated. I know you feel overlooked. But this kind of attitude won't help your reputation in the industry. I almost laughed. Reputation. As if it hadn't taken me years to build it. As if I hadn't earned it, email by email, crisis by crisis. I've been nothing but professional, Alan, I said. You wanted a clean transition, and I've made sure you have one. He didn't answer, just stared at his desk, like maybe it would give him a solution. By the following week, the pressure had started leaking outside the building. Westbrook Machinery emailed their account manager, me, asking why no one had followed up on their last 4 queries. I forwarded it to Lisa. She responded with a working on it auto template. They replied, we need a person, not a placeholder. Then came the voicemail from Haldren Metal's COO. Samantha, We've had 3 rescheduling requests from your replacement, and it's causing issues on our production end. Please let us know who's in charge now, because honestly, it doesn't feel like anyone is. That night, I was at home when my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. Is this Samantha Nolan? A voice asked. Yes, who's calling? My name's Miguel Alvarez. I'm the Director of Operations at Argon Works Supply. We've heard you're finishing up at Eastbridge. Would you be open to a conversation? I sat up straighter. How did you hear that? Word travels, he said, especially when key clients start asking where their person went. He continued, we've been following your work for a while. Copper Splice, Westbrook, even Morrison. Everyone speaks highly of you. We're expanding our Southwest footprint, and frankly, we need someone like you. Miguel added, we're offering a director-level position, better pay, full authority, and you can bring your client relationships, if they choose to follow. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, not pride, relief. For 8 years, I had carried a department on my back, and only now was someone finally seeing it. I'd be happy to set up a meeting, I said. Great, he replied. I'll have my assistant reach out in the morning. The next day, I walked into Eastbridge feeling different, like I was already gone. As I passed Lisa's office, I noticed she was reprinting another client schedule. The timestamp showed it had already been sent out. Wrong version. Again. She looked up and smiled nervously. I'll figure it out. I nodded. I know you will. By the time my final Monday at Eastbridge rolled around, something in the air had shifted. The office didn't hum with its usual rhythm. It sputtered. Emails were delayed. Clients were agitated. People were whispering more than talking. Everyone could feel it. The seams were starting to split. That morning, I had a second phone call with Miguel Alvarez from Argon Works, who now sounded even more eager than before. We'd like to formally offer you the role, he said. Director of Regional Operations. Your call on team structure, vendors, hiring, full autonomy. And the accounts I've been managing? I asked. Miguel chuckled. If even half of them follow you, it would more than pay for your first year's salary. I paused, then asked the one thing still lingering in the back of my mind. Would you want me to bring anyone else from Eastbridge? Only if they're good, he said simply. That call ended with a verbal agreement and a pending contract. My future was changing. Quietly, cleanly, like turning the page of a book mid-sentence. At 10:42 a.m., Alan called me into his office. His voice over the intercom was tight, strained. Samantha, could you step in for a moment? I walked in and saw the signs immediately. Papers scattered, his coffee untouched. A man unraveling behind a polished desk. He didn't ask me to sit. We lost Haldren Metal this morning, he said flatly. They pulled their Q3 orders and said they'll be reassessing partnerships before year-end. I nodded slowly. I assume they copied you on the email? He added. They did. Alan rubbed the bridge of his nose. They mentioned transition issues, sloppy communication, incomplete delivery schedules. They're not wrong. Silence. Then, Samantha, I think we were hasty. My eyebrows lifted. I mean, maybe we didn't think the leadership move through. Lisa is... She's talented, but maybe not ready. I said nothing. I've spoken to corporate, he continued. There might be an opportunity to bring you back into a leadership role. Director level. You'd be paired with Lisa, but you'd have final say on all operations decisions. I almost laughed. The same job I'd been denied, now being offered with conditions. I appreciate that, I said evenly. But I already have an offer. Alan's face went still. What? I've accepted a position elsewhere. Same title, better pay, complete control, and I don't have to share a desk with someone who just learned how to read a freight report. He didn't blink, just stared like he was trying to will time backward. You haven't even finished your 2 weeks? He said. No, I replied, but I don't owe you loyalty after what you did. He walked around the desk, arms crossed. Do you know what this looks like? Jumping ship, taking clients. That's borderline unethical. My jaw tightened. You're the one who treated me like a placeholder, I said. Clients follow people they trust. I never signed a non-compete. And if you're worried about ethics, maybe start with how Lisa was promoted. Alan stepped back, color rising in his cheeks. You can't do this. I already have. He pointed at me. You don't get to just take what we built. I stared at him, calm. You didn't build it, Alan. I did, and I'm just taking myself. That afternoon, Lisa knocked on my door. Her expression was somewhere between panic and guilt. Copper Splice just sent another complaint, she said. Something about shipping schedules again. I'm trying to fix it, but it's... She stopped herself. It's harder than I thought. I offered her a chair. What do you need help with? She hesitated. Everything. I helped her rewrite the email response, walked her through the vendor's expectations, and reorganized the spreadsheet she had been using. She watched, clearly overwhelmed, but still trying to keep up. After a while, she sighed. You must hate me. I looked at her for a long moment. I don't, I said. I hate that you were put in a role you weren't prepared for. I hate that I wasn't seen for the work I did. But this mess? That's not just yours. Lisa blinked, like no one had ever separated her from Alan before. She stood to leave, but paused in the doorway. Are you really leaving? Yes. And the clients? They'll go where the work gets done right. She nodded. I hope I can earn it. The respect I gave her a small smile. Then start by listening to the people who built what you inherited. That evening, I got a text from Tom at Westbrook Machinery. Heard you're heading to Argon Works. Call me tomorrow. We're interested in talking. Another message arrived 30 minutes later. Janet from Copper Splice. New contact at Eastbridge is lost. If you're going independent, we want in. I looked at both texts and realized something profound. I wasn't just walking away from a job. I was stepping into something I had quietly built all along. A network, a reputation, a system of trust. I spent my final Friday at Eastbridge finishing what most people wouldn't have bothered with. Vendor manuals, escalation protocols, client preference sheets. Every last detail I'd carried in my head, I documented neatly and stored in a folder labeled Transition for Lisa. Not for Alan, not for the company, but for the people who'd end up dealing with the fallout. The office was quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't calm, just uncertain. The energy had changed. Conversations were shorter. Eyes didn't linger. Even the receptionist gave me a longer than usual look when I walked past with a box under my arm. By 4 p.m., I had packed the last of my things. A framed picture of Olivia from her 6th grade science fair, 2 notepads filled with diagrams and vendor sketches, and a chipped coffee mug I never let anyone else use. I dropped my security badge at HR, signed a single exit form, and then, just as I was about to leave, Alan called me back into his office. Just 5 minutes, he said, his voice tight. I walked in. Lisa was already there, eyes wide like she'd been ambushed. Alan stood by the window, arms crossed, shoulders stiff. We need to talk, he began. About the clients. I said nothing. We're getting calls, he continued. Emails, concerns about transition, delays, questions about your future plans. It's creating instability. That tends to happen, I said calmly, when you remove the person holding the threads together. Alan exhaled sharply. This isn't sustainable. We've had 2 major contracts placed on review and another pending cancellation. Lisa looked between us nervously. He turned back to me. Samantha, if this continues, Eastbridge could lose nearly 40% of its regional revenue. That's not my concern anymore, I said flatly. You made it clear I wasn't essential. Alan moved closer, lowering his voice. You've made your point. We underestimated you. You proved it. But if you think I'll sit back and let you take our clients, they're not your clients. I cut in. They're relationships, built on trust. And when you broke yours, they started looking elsewhere. Are you poaching them? They came to me. Alan's eyes narrowed. And what do you expect? That you'll just waltz into a new company, take everything with you, and we'll do nothing? I leaned forward slightly. You can try to stop people from leaving, Alan. But if they're already halfway out the door, it's not theft. It's consequence. That night, I had dinner with Olivia. We sat at our favorite Thai place, same booth near the window, sharing a plate of crispy duck and rice noodles. She noticed the quiet on my face. Was it a weird day? I nodded. The kind of day that feels like a full circle. I'm proud of you, she said between bites. You could have burned it all down, but you didn't. I smiled. Sometimes the best revenge is showing them what they lost, without ever raising your voice. She grinned. So what now? I leaned back. Now? I build something that no one can take from me. By the following week, the news had broken inside industry circles. Samantha Nolan was officially joining Argonne Works as Director of Regional Operations. The phone didn't stop buzzing. Clients, former coworkers, even a few competitors reached out. You free to meet next week? Would love to explore a move, if you're building a team. Heard what happened at Eastbridge. About time someone got smart and left. Miguel, my new boss, scheduled our onboarding in Austin. He flew me in personally. You were right, he said as we sat in the conference room. They weren't just buying product, they were buying you. I nodded. And now they'll buy from me again. Just somewhere better. Back at Eastbridge, I heard the unraveling continued. Haldren Metal officially pulled their Q3 deal. Copper Splice initiated review of their year-long agreement. Westbrook refused to speak with anyone but me. And Lisa? She had reportedly broken down in a meeting, overwhelmed by backlogged communications and mounting pressure. By mid-month, Alan had scheduled an emergency trip to corporate. Word was the board wasn't just upset. They were furious. He made one last attempt to save face. An email hit my inbox from his personal account. Samantha, I'd like to request a private call. No hostility. Just an opportunity to discuss options. I stared at it for a long time, then hit archive. People think loyalty is staying silent while you're passed over, but true loyalty starts with yourself, with knowing your value, and walking away the moment someone else stops seeing it. Eastbridge thought they could replace me in 4 months. They forgot I'd spent 8 years becoming irreplaceable. It had been 5 weeks since I left Eastbridge. 5 quiet, productive, deeply satisfying weeks. My office at Argonne Works was still sparse. Just a few personal photos, my laptop, and a whiteboard covered in planning notes. But it felt like mine. No one had handed me anything here. There were no favors, no shortcuts. Just recognition earned the old-fashioned way. By showing up, doing the work, and delivering results. By now, 4 of my former clients had officially moved their accounts to us. Not with dramatic emails or public declarations, just subtle paperwork, polite messages, and new purchase orders. Each one had said the same thing in their own way. We don't want to risk our supply chain with someone who's still learning what you already know. I never promised them perfection, just consistency. And in our industry, that's worth more than gold. One morning, while reviewing a new logistics contract, Miguel knocked on my door. You might want to see this, he said, holding a printed newsletter. I took the paper. The headline read, Eastbridge Tech announces sudden leadership restructuring amid client departures. Alan had resigned, officially to pursue other opportunities, but everyone knew what that meant. A polite way of saying, we've lost too much to keep you in place. Lisa, the article said, had been reassigned to a junior strategy analyst position under a mentor outside the operations team. It wasn't phrased as a demotion, but that's exactly what it was. They're bleeding, Miguel said, and they're not hiding it anymore. I set the paper down, feeling not triumphant, not smug, just settled. Let's not chase their mistakes, I said. Let's focus on what we're building. Miguel smiled. That's why we brought you in. 2 days later, I got a LinkedIn message I didn't expect. Lisa. Hi, Samantha. I know it's probably strange to hear from me. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you left behind. Your documentation, your guides. I've been using them every day. I didn't realize how much went into what you did. Not until I had to try doing it myself. I'm sorry for how everything unfolded. I was promoted because of who I knew, not what I knew. And I paid for that mistake. I'm learning now, the right way. I hope someday I'll earn the kind of trust people gave you. I really do. I sat with her message for a while before responding. Hi, Lisa. That role should never have been dropped on your shoulders the way it was. You didn't ask for it, but you stepped into it and you tried. That matters. Keep learning. Be better than the people who set you up to fail. And next time you're offered a title you haven't earned, ask why. Then ask who it should have gone to. You'll go far if you remember that. She replied with a simple, I will. Weeks turned to months. Argonne Works grew. My team expanded. I hired 2 former colleagues from Eastbridge, people who'd also felt invisible under Alan's leadership. Together, we rebuilt. Better systems, stronger processes. A culture rooted in respect, not hierarchy. One afternoon, my daughter Olivia stopped by the office. She was shadowing me for a school project on leadership. After a few hours of watching meetings, calls, and my whiteboard scrawls, she asked, Mom, how do you know who to trust? I thought for a second. You watch who shows up when there's no spotlight, who follows through when no one's clapping. That's who you build with. She nodded thoughtfully, then smiled. And you? You're the boss now, right? I laughed. Technically. But the real kind. The kind people want to work with. That one stayed with me for days. One evening, I sat outside on the back porch, laptop closed, wine in hand. The wind rustled the trees and the world felt quiet again. Not because life was easy now, but because the noise had changed. For 8 years, I'd chased approval. Promotions, recognition that always seemed just out of reach. And when I finally walked away, I realized I didn't need them to give me value. I already had it. Alan's biggest mistake wasn't promoting his niece. It was assuming I'd stay anyway. That I needed him more than he needed me. He never understood that when a person with experience, integrity, and relationships leaves, they take more than their box of desk supplies. They take trust. And trust doesn't stay behind for the next person in line.